Being a chartered manager means that you are a specialist in that area, and it means you've got all the skills to do the job to the best of its ability.
You are seen as a leader, a true leader who has credentials behind the great work you've already been doing.
It's enhanced my understanding, it's enhanced my skill set, it's improved my mindset.
It makes all the difference.
This session is recorded and will be available on the CMI website and YouTube channel. Join the conversation by using the live chat box for your questions and comments. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Green Skills What's the Fuss About digital event. My name is Mary Bolawale, and I'm an events delivery coordinator at CMI. Please don't forget to join the conversation by using the live chat box, and feel free to ask any questions that you have for the speakers, and we'll answer as many as possible during the Q&A session. I will now hand over to Katie Kelly, the chair of the CMI London Regional Board, to begin today's event.
Thanks, Mary. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. As Mary mentioned, it's called Green Skills, What's the Fuss About? Thank you for joining us on what I was going to say is a sunny Monday lunchtime. Doesn't look so sunny anymore, but it is very windy, and that's important because as part of our discussion on green skills, I'm sure we're going to touch on renewable energy. So thank you for being here. To introduce myself, I'm Katie Kelly. I'm a change practitioner with over 15 years experience supporting organisations and employees excel during change. And over the last 5 or so years, I've built deep expertise doing this in the energy industry in particular, a sector obviously in the midst of one of the most important transitions to date. And as Mary mentioned, I'm also the chair of the CMI London board. For those unfamiliar with the CMI, our sole mission centres around building the right skills for managers and leaders. And of course, this now includes green skills. And this is exactly what we intend to unpack today over the next hour or so. I'm delighted to be joined today by 2 other fantastic speakers who will introduce themselves properly as part of their presentations. But for now, I just wanted to say hello to Stephen Barrett, who is a chartered manager, Fellow of the Chartered Management Institute and Director of Membership and Strategic Engagement at Energy and Utility Skills Group. And also welcome David Jones, also a Chartered Manager and the Green Transition Policy and Innovation Manager at the CMI. So welcome both and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Katie.
Thanks, Katie.
Today is actually one of a 3-part series, our first one in a 3-part series that's going to focus on green skills, why they're important, how you attract them, how you retain them, and how you build them. And in today's session, we're going to keep things quite simple and talk frankly about what green skills are, because there are various definitions out there, why they matter, why they might often be overlooked, and what we can actually start to do about it. There will also be time for questions. As Mary mentioned, some people have submitted some in advance as part of the registration, so thank you to those that have done that. But please do use the chat bar to provide any commentary, feedback, and of course questions as well, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentations. Before I pass to Stephen and David after that, I just wanted to give my thoughts on what green skills are and why they're important. I'm sure Stephen and David probably will share their own definitions, but I'd just like to share mine. And I like to describe green skills as the knowledge, abilities, values, attitudes, and behaviours that we need to live in and develop and support a sustainable future. And as mentioned, several definitions exist or running along similar themes, but lots of them are focused just on purely the technical skills, and other definitions are broader, including enabling skills and attitudes as well. So essentially, I believe green skills exist on a spectrum. There are the obvious technical green skills I mentioned, the ones that usually come to mind when people hear the term green skills. And these are things like renewable energy engineering, retrofitting buildings, carbon accounting, EV design, circular manufacturing. I could go on and mention things that will include things I don't understand as well, as they are highly specialised and critical. And we definitely do need more people with these deep technical capabilities. But green skills, for me, are not just for engineers and scientists. And in fact, one of the biggest insights, I think, from the last few years, as we've started to hone in on what we need to achieve the energy transition, is that every job is, or soon will be, a green job to some extent. And that's why we talk about transferable green skills. So skills that cut across functions and industries, no matter what role you are providing an organisation. And these include things like systems thinking, so making sure that we see the bigger picture and understand the environmental impacts of what we're doing day to day. Change leadership, something close to my heart as a change management professional. So how leadership can influence behaviours and mindsets across teams, increasingly important when we think about influencing from a sustainability perspective as well. Sustainability literacy, knowing the basics of climate risks and opportunities, and this could extend out as well to understanding the language we use around sustainability. And innovation and problem solving, one of the most exciting opportunities, I think, to build skills in. So we need to find new ways to do business, we need to take more risks, we need to encourage ideation to help improve environmental impacts of the businesses that we run. So whether you're in finance, HR, marketing, or operations, there's a dimension of green skills that you need to have to do your job effectively. And this is only going to increase as we move further forward into the energy transition. So why do they actually matter? So hopefully, apart from the obvious critical energy transition that's going to help our world continue spinning, there are a number of commercial and business related benefits that make it important to build green skills. So firstly, the market's demanding it. So whether it's clients, investors, regulators, or your everyday consumer, those groups of people are increasingly asking organizations to prove their sustainability credentials. And this means that companies need people internally with the right skills to understand, communicate, and deliver on those promises, on those sustainability goals. If you don't have the right skills internally, then you're going to risk losing out commercially, essentially, or even worse, making some very costly mistakes. Secondly, the workforce expects it. So a few years ago, I saw a surge in people asking about DE&I commitments during job interviews in particular. And this increasingly now is including, and what are your sustainability goals? What are you doing to build a sustainable business and contribute to a net zero future? So people, especially younger talent, want meaningful work. Surveys show and other research that Gen Z and millennials prefer employers who take sustainability seriously. So having green skills embedded in roles and training programs that can help employees build green skills is becoming a critical thing when people are considering what organizations to move to. So in order to attract and retain the best talent, you need to make sure this is top of mind. And then lastly, it's an opportunity. This links back to what I said around encouraging innovation skills. Green skills open the door to innovation and growth. Companies that are building green skills now are going to position themselves to lead in new markets and develop new products and respond flexibly to shifting regulations and consumer demands and keep themselves competitive, essentially. So it's not just a nice to have green skills. I'd say it's a must have if you want to remain resilient, competitive, and to future proof your organization, as well as obviously the world as well. So that's my hot take on just what green skills are and why they're important. And I'm sure Stephen and David will touch on some of the points I've mentioned as part of their presentations as well. So thank you, and I'll pass to Stephen now.
Thank you so much, Katie. And can I just say how delighted I am to be here talking to you all today about something that's very dear to my heart, and that's skills, and certainly green skills as we move forward. So what's all the fuss about? Let's have a look at it slightly deeper. Before we get into that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my organisation. So I am Stephen Barrett. I am Director of Membership and Strategic Engagement here at Energy and Utility Skills. Energy and Utility Skills is the sector skills council that covers water, power, gas and waste industries. We cover all 4 nations, and we look at a number of priorities which have been set by industry around things like ED&I, sector attraction, competencies and skills, and also a real long-range view of what those future skills are. Our vision, which makes me get out of bed every morning, is skills for a greener world, which is very apt for right now. And also how we do that. That mission is around delivering that safe, skilled, sustainable workforce with energy and utilities industries. So as a membership organisation, we bring people together under that convene and collaborate right in the middle there. And we look to set industry standards, driving best practice. And also we engage with government across the 4 nations, also regulators, looking at really what the best options are around skills and making sure we've got that future skills that we're going to need in the future. We also deliver a number of other, if you like, industry services, and that's things like endpoint assessment. We also do qualifications and things like standards which are coming out of the health and safety requirements, especially across the water industry, maybe on the things like water qualifications and other elements of stuff which need to be delivered as part of that core job which Katie talked about earlier. Katie, you mentioned in your list a number of things. I'm going to add skills to that as well, because you mentioned knowledge and a number of other pieces, but I want to put in skills that are really important. We think about knowledge, skills and behaviors and how we take those forward. So let's ask that question again then. What's the problem? Well, simply, we don't have enough people with the right skills. We have a lot of people looking for jobs in the industry, but they don't have the right skills. When we put out apprenticeship adverts with organizations, we get tenfold views of those jobs. We get applications which are coming out of our ears, but we don't get them in the right places. So therefore, we need to look at building that sustainable workforce of people with the right skills. But not only with the right skills as well, we're also looking for a diverse workforce. We need to increase the diversity of the industry, because we are simply very much looking like me, unfortunately, and I consider myself as part of that problem. But look, there are a number of areas that we need to concentrate on. So how are we looking at that then? Let's consider the macro environment. So when we look at the sector right the way across industry, there are a number of things which are really converging to drive up that challenge. And when we look at attracting people to our industry, these are all things which are in the headlines every day. And if you turn on the news, you open a newspaper, there are things about these all the time. You don't really consider, perhaps, when we're looking for jobs or we're looking for people to fill jobs in the energy sector, some of these other competing forces. So things like what the public think of the industry, what the public think of the direction of travel that we're going, the affordability, and we talk about the trilemma quite often. Well, these are all things which are having an impact on what we do. So having that safe, skilled, sustainable workforce across the industries then is really important if we are going to deliver this transition to net zero. So some of the challenges which we've got then, rapid technological evolution. So when I talk about technological evolution, I'm talking about updating of energy systems. So we talk quite often about the renewable side, and actually microgeneration alongside some of the big gigawatt production, like the new nuclear, which has just been announced in the east of England, as well as the ongoing development of Hinkley Point C down in the southwest, all mean that we need an energy system that can cope with all of those elements. Also, when we think about things like the qualifications basis that we have at the moment, whereby to be an EV charge point installer or to be a solar panel installer, you have to be a fully qualified electrician. Well, that system has moved on, or the requirement for the right skills has moved on at pace. And if we're to hit the transition to net zero in a timely way and effectively and also safely, we need to perhaps think about how we're delivering those skills, perhaps in a more modularized approach whereby people can build on those skills. So certainly an area of consideration as we think about bringing people on. Achieving the net zero whilst balancing that energy equity and security of supply, despite the recent NESO announcement, that does need £40 billion spend per year. Now, where do all those people come from to deliver that, let alone the financing? We can address the financing by having some clear measures of achievement, but we still have a skills base in the UK at the moment, which we don't have sufficient people with the right skills to be able to deliver that. So we have to think differently about how we're doing things. We're still heavily dependent on migrant workforce to deliver against those specialist skills. So sometimes we're bringing in those specialist skills, but we need to consider that homegrown talent. We need to be developing our people as they're coming through. And that includes entry routes into industry. So thinking about how do we increase that hopper size? And I'll talk to you a little bit about the sorts of scale of people or the size or the amount of people that we need coming in at various levels in a second. So some of those major infrastructure projects, we simply don't have the right skills in the UK. So there is going to be a certain amount of dependency bringing in that migrant workforce. Also, the regulatory cycles. So for those of you that aren't aware, when we're operating monopolies, we work underneath that financial regulator. And for the power networks and the water networks, certainly, we depended on Ofgem and Ofwat to look at price setting and how that works. Now, that creates a certain challenge, which perhaps if you haven't been operating in that environment, you wouldn't have thought about. And there's a real feast and famine around contracts being awarded, and therefore a change in supply chain organizations, and also a lack of I guess, long-term planning ability when we look at some of the uncertainty mechanisms which are built into that regulatory framework. So therefore, having long-range view of those contracts, those projects which are coming through to enable that transition to net zero is going to be really important. So when we see things in the headlines about network infrastructure updates, and we're talking about smart meter rollout beyond smart meter, though, into EV charge points and those retrofits in people's homes, as well as the solar challenge that we have, that requires us to think differently about skills and perhaps looking at that modularized approach. Also, we're operating in a hyper competitive environment. When we look for the skills that we need for the future, they're not just coming to our industry. We're also competing with those tech industries. And as we transfer that network to become much more modern, we are looking at much more digital skills. So therefore, digital AI, the elements of cyber security, they're all considerations. Also, we're operating in a global market. So when we think about those geopolitical influences on the market, that disrupts potential financial assurance that people need when they're looking to invest in those systems. So therefore, you've got the finances, you've got the big picture, what's going on perhaps in Ukraine, what's going on in the Middle East at the moment, and they're all converging on this challenge that we have to get the right people with the right skills into the right jobs at the right time. So a number of elements of things there which we need to consider. So as we look ahead then, we think about, right, what does that mean in terms of the workforce? So we understand the context. These things are happening anyway. So we have estimated at the moment by the end of 2030 that they will need 312,300 new people to the workforce. And that's to achieve this transition to net zero within the energy system. So are they all green jobs? Are they all different shades of green? Well, that is still yet to be established. Now, what I will say is through all of our analysis that we've done, looking at jobs, looking at the occupational profiles, looking at the skills that are required, it's generally very few skills or new skills which are going to be required. This is more about people transitioning their current skills to make sure that they are ready for those jobs which are coming down the line. And when we think about things like installing carbon capture, we talk about network upgrades. Yes, there are elements which will require a transitioning of those roles, but we're not seeing any wholesale changes in those skills requirements at the moment. And what about the people then? So 205,500 new jobs, up 32% on 2024 workforce. And that's amidst 106,800 retirements. So there is an attrition, as I said earlier. Unfortunately, a lot of the people in industry look a little bit too much like me, and we are approaching retirement. And you can see some of those retirement numbers down the bottom. But let's hone in specifically on power, because I think that's really important. So total employment at 2024 was 158,000. By 2030, that's going to be moving to 290,000. So you think about that headline figure, new people required on the right-hand side there, just shy of 157,000. So it's an average per year of 22,400, and that's to cope with the retirements and those new roles which are required. So what about the occupations then? Thinking about where they fit. And specifically, I think I've highlighted here that RQF level 7, 8. So we're talking about senior managers, looking at perhaps master's degrees or degree level training. And quite often people have established that through coming through perhaps a more traditional entry into industry, and then moving up through various jobs and then looking to move into that senior management role. So therefore, at the top there, we've got essentially around new jobs created about 20,700. So therefore, new people over that period, then up to 2030, we can need 38,100. And those of you that know that are operating in these types of environments, not energy, just in general jobs, we know that every time someone moves up, then there is a vacancy which is created below. So therefore, there is a dragging of resources up through that career progression, and therefore, and it's not always directly related to RQF, so your qualification level, I appreciate, but you could see from these types of this type of analysis the sorts of numbers which we required. So the occupations will see the largest increase of jobs are across science, research, engineering, technology professionals. That's skilled technicians below that degree level. On 35, on that SOC code, 2-digit SOC code, we've got business and public service associate professionals, and on 52, skilled metal, electrical, and electronic trades. So you can see there a real mix of both management and technical skills, which are going to be required as we're going through the next 5 years. In terms of occupations that need to attract the highest number of new people into the workforce, we're looking at science, research, engineering, technology professionals, skilled metal, electrical, electronic trades, and corporate managers and directors. So think about that one, corporate managers and directors. So if you're operating in a sector at the moment, which may be adjacent to energy and utilities, you can see that there is going to be a significant uplift in that as we go forward. So thinking about specifically then the 312,000 people required across the sector, those numbers which I called out earlier, 52% will be initially working at RQF level 3 or below. But conversely then, the opposite could be said about working above that level. But on that 20%, that 63,000 required at that entry level, that's going to be a really important factor as we go forward, because unless we can get those new people into industry, we simply won't see that progression as we go through that, that career progression. Now, one of the things which we're looking at across energy and utility skills is working with a series of partners looking at opening up entry-level programs of activity to get people into industry. And they're around the real basic skills, but they are enabling jobs. It's not just about getting any job, it's about getting the best job and then allowing them to move up through that career progression as they progress their career. So really important for us to look at those both levels. I'm going to focus in again slightly on that RQF level 7 and 8. And for those of you that are in the know, you'll know that Skills England has recently always looking to pull funding from those level 7 qualifications, which is a concern for us, but we can see the reason for them doing that, because this is about pushing funding to those entry routes to make people progress through their careers. Now, in terms of the qualifications and the potential career progression at that level 7, 8, it's going to be really important to make sure we are aligned with industry on what those future requirements are. And we're going to be talking a little bit later with David about something which the Chartered Management Institute is looking at around those sustainability qualifications. And that's going to be really important as we start to progress people through those right appropriate areas. You remember earlier I talked about people with the right skills at the right time in the right place going into those jobs, and that's going to be really important to make sure we maintain that progression through industry. So how are we doing much of this then? So we are looking to collaborate with industry. We are collaborating. We are in the process of developing a 25 to 2030 strategy, which will be published in October at our conference on the 8th of October in Birmingham. And this is going to be fundamentally around 4 key principles with a number of cross-cutting themes. The first one is that ongoing analysis of workforce demand to mitigate that risk through timely intervention. So we run a series of reports, around 25 reports per year, looking at what those skills requirements are. And that looks at things like technology changes, and therefore pulls back from that and looks at what those people implications are and what skills people will need going into the future. We're also looking at a sector attraction piece of work, and that's looking at attracting that workforce to meet that future demand of net zero, but also looking at that sustainable element around our environment, which is going to be really important. We're also looking at the skills element. Part of that, developing and deploying that safe, skills, sustainable workforce that meets those future demands, is making sure we create a demand-led system. And that's about identifying the specific roles, the priority roles, and how we're going to both attract and develop them into those key areas that are going to need that prioritization as we go forward. And then we're going to look at retention. So retaining people in the industry, once we've got them, we don't want to lose them. That's going to be really important. And actually, when people look to join the industry, sometimes they don't get that first job which they would like. But we're looking to say, well, look, that we need to regret these people, and but we need to keep them in the industry. So one of the systems which we've got in place at the moment is a talent pool system, which works within our other branded website, which is Energy and Utility Careers and Jobs, and that supports a whole host of job postings, as well as being the shop window of industry that pushes that perception of industry and tries to improve that attraction into our industry. Remember, we are looking for that diverse workforce. So thinking about that cross-cutting themes, these are going to be really important elements as we go forward. Information technology, it's evolving at a ridiculous pace at the moment, and that is in collaboration with artificial intelligence. These are constant movers. We're seeing role evolution as well as new roles coming in, which we hadn't really thought about maybe even 2 or 3 years ago. And that's about maintaining things like cybersecurity, things like around SCADA and remote operation of plants, certainly across the power networks and the water networks, to make sure we're maintaining that resilient network. And last but not least, OT, so operational technology. That's making sure that operationally people understand what the implications are of AI, information technology, and cybersecurity out there on the plant, because people need to recognize if there is an attack on their infrastructure and be able to take appropriate actions. But that's not the only reason. This is about making sure that people, even if they're operating with palm top organizers, or if they're operating network interrogation systems around fault finding, etc., they understand what those requirements are. Last but not least, in their equity, diversity, and inclusion, that's a real important part. So when we've written out these strategies, these strategic themes, the various elements of these, that's going to be really important. Remember, the workforce which we have at the moment is not the workforce that we want going forward. We need to build on that strong credibility, that robustness, that safety culture, and making sure that we're developing that with a diverse workforce. And that's not just about one part of diversity. There are numerous elements of diversity which we need for as we go forward. So what are we looking to create from that? That strategic vision. We'll look to accelerate growth of a safe, skilled, sustainable workforce that powers and protects the UK, and it enables social, economic, and environmental transformation. This is big picture thinking. We're us working in collaboration with government, stakeholders, and industry is going to be really important as we take that forward. We're looking to open up accessible pathways for people from all generations, backgrounds, and communities. And we're looking to fill hundreds of thousands. Remember, at the moment, we've got 312,000 jobs to fill here, but it goes beyond that. It doesn't just end at 2030. It goes way beyond that. We're looking to empower individuals with meaningful careers, enabling our sector to thrive as a cornerstone of the UK's low-carbon future, enhancing the natural habitats, delivering green infrastructure, enabling energy security, and improving the lives of everyone. So some real big picture thinking on this strategy. So what do we need then? So we need DFE and Skills England to build agility into the skills system to support skills, transferability, and modularized program. I mentioned earlier about the speed of transition. Well, what we know for the next 5 years is probably a lot of the people which are going to deliver this transition to net zero, they're not coming through the skills system at the moment. They may be if they're nearing the end of their program, but in reality, it's going to be people which are already in the system. And therefore, we need to look at that transferability and look at the potential of modularized programs. We need DESNES to continue collaborating on sector attraction and social impact initiatives to improve diversity and attract the numbers we need to achieve that net zero. We need DWP, LSIPs, local skills, industrial partnerships, devolved administrations, and mayoral authorities to support entry-level role demands through funding of targeted programs. I mentioned earlier about some of the work we've got going on around those lower level skills, but also through those high level skills and looking at how we fund those programs to make sure we maintain that movement of people through those organizations in terms of careers. We need regulators to provide certainty where applicable to enable long-term skills planning and reduce poaching amongst employers operated within an already scarce set of resources. Some of the work which I did many, many years ago was looking at the skills plan around Hinkley Point C, and that was all about making sure that the local area had those skills which they needed. So not only did they take the skills out of the area, but also they were able to replace them to make sure that infrastructure maintained operation. And also we need employers to continue to collaborate for success and develop an effective workforce and deliver skills or net zero to ensure managers have the right skills to enable this. So net zero, managers delivering that is going to be really, really important. Certainly as a chartered manager myself, I appreciate the benefits of being a chartered manager within Chartered Management Institute and the benefits which that brings. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to David and say thank you very much for your attention today.
Thank you, Steve. I found that fascinating. Actually, I've made some notes, particularly kind of entry routes into the sector, progression routes through the sector, and actually taking that long-term view. And there was some great recommendations there. So I'm David Jones. I'm Policy and Innovation Manager for Green Transition here at CMI. I've been in this role for 2 years. And during that time, we've undertaken some research, and I'll share the findings with you a little later. And we've developed some new qualifications in this space. I intend to try to draw a line from green skills through into management and leadership. Prior to CMI, I led on sustainability for the awarding organisation NCFE. And outside of work, I'm a school governor with a curriculum link to geography, and I'm also a climate ambassador. So if I could get the next slide, please, Mary. So we've all kind of touched on green skills and looking at what green skills are, and there's various definitions, and that's kind of why I put the slide up on the screen here. It shows that the variety, but I want to focus on two of these here. So I'll look at UNESCO. So they say, in essence, green skills are about both technical knowledge and skills that allow professionals to use green technologies and processes, and also transversal skills. So as well as the knowledge, values, and attitudes which help them to take environmental decisions in their work and lives. And green skills are already being introduced in training systems globally, and that talks about the knowledge, values, attitudes, and behaviors. The Learning and Work Institute, so green skills defined as skills needed to promote a green economy recovery, focusing on reducing carbon emissions. So it can range from the technical skills that we've mentioned, so those relating to construction, engineering, renewables, etc., to more general green skills such as project management, change management, leadership, and communication skills. So next slide, please. Research shows, though, that whilst the technical skills are really, really important for the transition to net zero, soft skills and management skills will also be required to support business leaders' efforts to transition their businesses towards greener ways of working. And that's why I've got this graph on there. And you can see that management skills were rated really, really highly at 97.7% as being important skills for employees to have within organizations relating to zero. And that was from an Economist impact report in 2023. Next slide, please. So your broader cross-sectoral green skills will be obviously really, really important, and strong management and leadership skills are going to be crucial for responding to those changes happening to the economy and labour market within the UK. So management skills are pivotal in harnessing the opportunities presented by economic transitions. Strong management and leadership are essential for expediting the adoption of new technologies, preparing for a sustainable post-carbon future. Small, medium-sized enterprises in particular will need good management to navigate economic changes with limited resources. And research supports the value of investing in management and leadership development. Organizations that do see on average a 23% increase in organizational performance and a 32% increase in people performance. The importance of effective management in the UK is paramount as today's leaders and managers face considerable geopolitical uncertainty, as Steve mentioned, stresses in public services, and enduring economic weakness. We're undergoing a kind of a triple transition within the economy involving an aging and diversifying workforce, a long-term shift towards knowledge-based industries, policy and market-driven imperatives to move towards net zero, obviously. If UK productivity were to continue growing at its current trend, sustaining any sort of improved living standards would be challenging. And that weakness applies right across the country. We did some work with Institute of Directors in 2021, which highlighted the training in leadership and management skills is vital to ensure that workers are resilient to the rapidly changing labour market. They should be considered core skills, which are vital across, regardless of sector, of size of business or role. Leadership and management skills widen the pool of jobs that people can access and enhance their ability to progress within those roles. Evidence from the OECD stresses that the quality of management is particularly important for SMEs. And as we mentioned before, organizations that invest in management and leadership development see on average a 23% increase in organizational performance. Next slide, please, Mary. So change management. We can consider the transition to net zero as a change management approach to engage people on their future, but guided by science. So organizational change and the net zero transition can be adaptive or transformational. Multiple models exist, and most focus on how to create a shared vision for the future. So enabling change, accelerating the pace of change, and adapting to changing conditions. To genuinely have a chance of reaching net zero, we need to bring a more human-centered change management approach to transition planning. So an approach that envisions and develops strategy for a future that we want to live in, rather than always talking about metrics and data. And what we've learned from change management processes in the business world is that there needs to be that shared vision or common understanding of what we're trying to achieve. To be able to think about new food and transport systems, different ways to generate energy, new skills and beyond. So we need to engage our imaginations, as well as recognizing the cognitive dissonance that exists today between the world that we think we'll be living in versus the world that we want to live in. So what does that mean for businesses? It means things like emotion and competencies. Do we possess the knowledge and skills to implement change within an organization? We look at things like individual sense, meaning and interpretation. So we'll all probably understand net zero in slightly different ways. We have to process the messaging on climate change, net zero, etc., climate denial, climate activism, so extremes of the argument. Aligning individual sense with organizational sense, so understanding of what we can do individually and what our organizations need to do. Identifying and harnessing tacit knowledge, so collecting all those things that we know how to do, but perhaps don't know how to explain. Enabling emergence, so allowing entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial mindset and skills. That's going to be really important as the pace of change is rapid. Things like new ways of measuring business performance, annual reports, carbon reporting, experiential communities of learning and reflection, sharing best practice amongst peers, so businesses and individuals learning together. So the change management process links with the strategy and execution, deployment with operation, and the ultimate realization of the expected benefits. So next slide, please. The growing focus on climate change and environmental responsibility places an increasing pressure on businesses to adapt. So strong management and leadership are essential in navigating that shift, ensuring sustainability is not just a compliance requirement, but a core part of business strategies. Managers and leaders must champion change, embed sustainable thinking into decision-making, and create a culture where innovation drives long-term environmental and economic success. Clear leadership direction and effective management practices are key to integrating sustainability seamlessly into operations and meeting the rising expectations of consumers and regulators. And I'm going to touch now on some of the research that we've done. Next slide, please, Mary. So earlier this year, we undertook some research with our members, and we found that 74% of managers shared that their organization places at least a moderate priority on net zero and sustainability. Around 3 in 5 managers were confident that their organization is prepared for changes to achieve net zero, with 15% being very confident and 44% somewhat confident of this. 1/3, though, or 1 in 3, were not confident. And if we look at the overall population of managers in the UK, which is around about 6.5 million, that 1/3 then becomes a really big number. Overall, almost 7 in 10 managers agreed that they were confident in their ability to support their organization's net zero and sustainability goals, but a quarter, though, disagreed with that. Next slide, please, Mary. Over 4 in 5 managers that we spoke to agreed that they think that all managers will be required to have an understanding of net zero and sustainability. And 8 in 10 managers agreed that they'd benefit from having some training on net zero and sustainability, with 3 in 10 strongly agreeing. Positively, again, 53% of managers agreed that they have a clear understanding of how net zero and sustainability relate to their role, but 42% of managers disagreed with that statement. So we need to tie in sustainability with management and leadership roles. Next slide, please, Mary. So green management jobs. The total number of green management jobs in the UK has grown by 18% over the past decade. Starting at 98,000 in 2015, the figure's risen steadily to 116,000 in 2024, and that highlights the expanding role of management in the green sector and reflects the increasing need for sustainability management and leadership. Next slide, please. Green jobs with management skills as a proportion of all green jobs has increased. And again, that trend underscores the importance and leadership roles within the green economy as organizations increasingly prioritize strategic management in their sustainability efforts. Next slide, please, Mary. The number of green jobs requiring management skills has seen sustained growth, rising from 136,000 to 186,000 in 2024. And that represents a 36% increase over the decade, and again highlights the demand for skilled management. It reflects the increasing integration of managerial expertise into sustainability roles across the sector. Next slide, please, Mary. So management roles requiring green skills grew considerably also, and that trend highlights the growing need for leaders and managers who can embed sustainability principles into their organizational strategies and organizational decision making. Next slide, please. So we look at sustainability leadership skills as being the competencies managers and leaders need to effectively deliver organizational and business outcomes in a way that meets legal requirements and wider economic, political, and social stakeholder expectations that we will reduce and reverse our negative impacts on the environment. They're not only about compliance, they encompass strategy, innovation, stakeholder management, change management, and contextual awareness. Next slide, please, Mary. So how are they applied? I'm not going to touch on all of these, but leadership skills are seen as really crucial or very important. So it might be the ability to consistently work towards a longer term vision for how the organization will recruit to a sustainable economy. It might be the ability to work collaboratively with different stakeholders, so external organizations, government, third sector, community groups. Effective and persuasive communication on sustainability issues using clear and accessible language. And that leads me on to what we've done at CMI in terms of our sustainability leadership qualifications. Next slide, please, Mary. So we've developed a series of sustainability leadership qualifications that we aim at junior managers, middle managers, and senior leaders. So we introduce sustainability as a concept that managers and leaders need to know about, and then look at what's important for them within their roles and within their organization. So we touch on things like ethical and inclusive leadership. We look at managing change. We look at strategic leadership and setting effective strategy. So from the middle management, how they can look up through the organizational lens, on how they can look down through the organizational lens. Junior managers, it's very much how can they influence change within that organization. And senior leaders, it's very much how they could set that vision and that strategy for that organization. And next slide, please, Mary. We went out, we spoke to 30 to 40 different organizations that kind of told us what was important to include within those qualifications. So you can see the things in there. So kind of the environment, looking at nature, how we can influence that, but things like triple bottom line principles, the circular economy. Again, you can see that stakeholders has come through that, resilience as well. So these really important skills for managers and leaders to have. And to draw my slides to a close, I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. So it doesn't matter whether you believe in climate change or not, because insurance companies believe in climate change. And that was from a Telegraph article in 2023. And a quote from the former chair of the Climate Change Committee. So the way we talk about climate change will make a difference to how others act. So those of us working on this topic have a responsibility to get it right. So analysis and science are only half of the battle. The language that we use to explain it is just as important. There's no success in being right if we aren't being understood. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Lots of ground covered there. Everything from the policy landscape and its impact on green skills requirements, the soft skills that we require, as well as the technical skills, and of course the actual scale of the challenge to build these green skills and actually get the workforce ready to deliver the energy transition. So thank you very much for your insights both. I hope that really brought some of these topics to life for the audience. We're going to move just over the next around 10 minutes to some questions. We've had some submitted already, so thank you to everybody that has done that. And I've seen that there's been lots of activity throughout today's session with comments and questions as well. So we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. The first question I would like to pose, and I'll give my thoughts before I pass to David and Steve, is from Ray. Ray said, I started in our company and I have been meeting a lot of resistance against sustainability in the area I am working in right now. What is the best way to introduce the change? And as a change practitioner, as I mentioned, managing resistance to change is something that I tackle on a daily basis. And my advice, whether it's to do with a sustainability change or otherwise, start by having candid conversations about why they are resisting change. It's usually because people are fearful that something in their day job's going to change, they won't be required anymore, that money's being spent where it shouldn't. So open up candid conversations to get to the bottom of why there is resistance. Hopefully it's not just because they don't want to live in a sustainable world. There normally are more complex reasons behind things like that, especially when it comes to resistance to sustainability. And then I'd always encourage my clients as well, when you're trying to prove the benefits, which is a good way to make people not resist change and buy into the change, start small and make sure that you're proving quick wins. So don't wait until you have achieved your whole B Corp certification, which can take a long time and is a whole complex process. Make sure you're demonstrating quick wins as you go along. That usually helps people open up to change a bit more easily. So I'll pass to Steve to start. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Thanks, Katie. I think somebody's mentioned in the post actually Wavefront Leadership about ESG and CSR, and there is a change afoot. This is coming. Sustainability is coming. So I think the organisations that choose not to adopt a sustainable approach are going to be left behind. So therefore, I think it's perhaps, what's the best way to introduce the change? I think it's about perhaps opening people's eyes to the potential about, contracts being awarded. If you're in the supply chain, for instance, if you're an asset owner, the regulator, and certainly, that push to be much more sustainable, much more green, is all driving us in one direction. I'd suggest that some of the resistance often comes from, yes, it is change, but sometimes it's financially driven. But I think the long-term financial benefits of becoming much more sustainable as a business will outweigh the potential risks of not becoming sustainable. So I think it's certainly a mindset in some organisations, certainly that I've observed over the years. But it does, I think it's down to all of us to continue to persist and make sure that happens. I think also there's potential for perhaps regulators, government, and other organisations to incentivise as well, because I talked earlier about the trilemma. Everybody wants a green planet, but when you sometimes say that you have to introduce a technology, perhaps in our homes, I've certainly got experience of being told that, well, you can have solar panels, but it's going to cost you like £12,000. well, am I ready to absorb the £12,000 straight away? That will make me much more sustainable, and my bills will come down eventually, but it's going to take me quite a while to get a return on that investment. So I think it's the same sort of mentality sometimes when you have organizations, but sustainability is definitely on its way, so you need to embrace.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Steve. Just picking up on your point as well about the wavefront leadership comment. Yes, you will be blocked from lots of tenders, particularly in the public sector. I work on lots of bids and proposals for work, and the public sector increasingly are asking you what you are doing towards sustainable practice and what your sustainability goals are. And some of the best organizations will be immediately disqualified because they can't demonstrate that. So yeah, it's a strong commercial message that needs to be driven to help drive resistance to change as well. Thank you. David, did you have anything else to add on the resistance to change question?
No, not too much. It just drawn on the points that you both said. So kind of listening to understand what the barriers are and actually looking at what the opportunities might be rather than focusing on the risk. What are the opportunities? And you've mentioned some there with kind of with supply chain and tenders.
Yeah, thank you. Another pre-submitted question from Sores. Why are green skills important nowadays? Which I think we've covered quite a lot of, hopefully. But the second part of the question is, how could I apply them in my leadership position? We've touched on why leadership is very important to drive change in green economies and sustainability. Again, from my perspective, I know how important leaders demonstrating the change that they want to see in their teams is often quoted as the most important thing to drive successful change. So I don't know if you two have got any further thoughts on how leaders and then maybe managers as well can apply green skills to drive the energy transition.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, in terms of leadership, it's very much setting the vision, the mission, and the values of the organisation that the workforce and the organisation can align to, and actually empowering the workforce. So trying to understand what skills you've got within your organisation and how everybody can be an agent of change. But I think we've touched on things. So stakeholder engagement is really, really important for sustainability and net zero. And also that communication is very, very clear. So if you're setting out your vision, mission and values, you really need to identify why you're doing it, why it's important, and bringing people along on that journey with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think just to build on that point, I'd ask yourself, I suppose, the question on what is that green skill, and for me, it reads as it's the future. It's an enabling skill that will enable that transition to net zero, that will support your organisation, that will support UK PLC. I think adopting a big picture, giving everybody ownership of what that ultimate goal is that aspirational piece. And I think certainly as a leader, when I go and speak to organizations, it's generally about, look, we all have a vested interest in this. I've got two small children, and I want there to be, a planet there for them to be able to grow up in, and their children to grow up in. So I think what we need to be doing at the moment is making sure that we're positioning that future really importantly around these clean jobs, these skills which are going to be required, which really will be those enabling jobs.
Yeah, for sure. That links very nicely into a question that was submitted by Kay Hill during the event, which talks about the importance of educating children. It's not just when people enter the workforce or when they're in higher education that we need to start talking about green skills. Kay Hill said, with sustainable recruitment in mind, do schools and colleges need to teach green skills better? And if so, how? My first take would be 100%, definitely. The energy transition is not going to end anytime soon. It's going to be never ending. There'll be new green skills that we need to develop in decades to come. So we need to start thinking about, as early as primary school, what does that actually mean? Obviously, the workers of the future are going to be shaped in both their homes, and I'll touch on why that's important in a minute, as well as classrooms. And you mentioned this, Steve. So we need to not just educate curriculum makers in what sustainability means, what the energy transition means, and how to build green skills. Parents are also very influential in the career decisions that their children make. We need to make sure that people that are potentially edging towards retirement or don't know as much about the green transition or why it's important, we need to educate them on what green skills are, why it's important. So when they're sitting down with their children and talking about what decisions they want to make in terms of university degrees or career decisions, they don't just automatically revert to, you should be a doctor or a lawyer. They think about the opportunities in the energy transition as well, and how they can help them. So yes, I would say completely, we need to start thinking sooner rather than later, and we need to start acting now as well. I don't know if either of you have got any further thoughts on that.
I can add to that, Kate. I think that the message which has landed is going to be really important, because I think if you look back, I remember watching footage of Prince Charles when he was a young, whippersnapper, and talking about environment and the impact and plastic bags in the oceans, and everyone thought, oh gosh, it's a bit balmy, it's kind of like, we can't stop that, can we? It's and the reality is, I think we need to be careful when we land the narrative and the audience that we have, because there can be it's a bit Marmite sometimes. I think people think, well, you're talking about tree hugging, you're talking about saving the planet again. Donald Trump says there is no climate kind of crisis, there is no, and allegedly, I'll just throw that in, but I think that the challenge for us all is to make sure that the message that we're lands with the right people, and school children, absolutely, yes, parents, absolutely, people that are influencing the careers and the thoughts of children when they're thinking about careers. That vision, skills for a greener world, that really does excite me, our vision as a business. And I think to give people ownership of this whole green skills sustainability going forward, I think we've got to make it meaningful for them. And it's not, it's not a pipe dream. It's not something which is in the future. It's something which is happening absolutely right here, right now. And I think if you can raise people's awareness of that and say to them, look, if you want to make an impact, if you want to be part of that transition, over here is an industry, potentially a career whereby you really can influence what the planet looks like, and you can deliver that transition to net zero. Yes, I know it's the UK and there are a lot of other countries, but look, if we step back and say we're not going to do it until China does it or until America does it, we'll never go any further. So I think it's about making sure that we land that message, and not in a way that's been us sat in an ivory tower, because we're all in the boat and we all need to row, we all need to get to the other side, so and deliver that transition.
Yeah, thank you. We've only got 1 minute left, 2 minutes left, maybe. I just do want to touch on something you just mentioned there, Steve, which is very topical, and something that I don't have thoughts on because I don't know about the international landscape, but I imagine that both of you have done some research into this. Again, a question from Kay Hill: which countries in Europe can the UK look to for both green skills related information and inspiration? Is there a standout area of the world that is doing this right, that we could look up to?
I'm going to touch on the last question and relate it to this one, actually, because I thought the last question was really, 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 really great. And young people ask the toughest questions on this, and that's really important. So if we're looking at kind of green skills, schools and curriculum, actually Italy do this really well. It's embedded within the curriculum that they deliver within schools. So that's something that we can learn from.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just echo that. I mean, I think there's been some really good work in Germany on hydrogen, for instance, and looking at the skills which are required across the piece. But yeah, I think you're right. Italy does a very good job there. And to be fair, we're getting better. I think in the UK, and we've got some really great initiatives out there, some fantastic organisations which are looking, to change the perception of industry, but we've got to make sure we've got the industry perception across the board, let alone in schools, right, and make sure it's a force for good, it's perceived as a force for good, because it will deliver that transition if we all get behind it.
Yeah, definitely. We're in a prime position with the amount of big energy infrastructure projects and organisations, as you mentioned, Steve, that are trying to fly the flag for building green skills. We could be a world leader in this, and people could be learning from us. So it's definitely the chance to embrace that. Thank you very much, both, and thank you to everybody for your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. I'm sure if you connect with any of us on LinkedIn, we'll be happy to have follow-up conversations. It's been really good to see the level of engagement. I just wanted to go round and because of time, ask your one top takeaway. And I'd say that mine, to kick things off, is that we need to act now. The energy transition is not stopping. We need green skills now. We need to take more risks and implement things and develop things that are going to test building green skills rather than waiting for the finished product. Yeah, the numbers are loud and clear. We haven't got enough people. We don't have the right skills. We're not going to be able to do this if we don't act now. So that's my main takeaway, I think, from today.
I've got 3 C's. I've got collaborate, communicate, and commit. I think to drive change forward.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. I'm absolutely with you both there. It's got to be about acting now. It's got to be everybody get behind this. I mentioned earlier, we're all in the same boat. Let's get rowing and let's get on with it.
Yes, I like that. Well, thank you very much again for your time, and thank you to everybody that attended today. Again, we'd love you to share your comments and feedback, and you'll receive some of the materials from today as well. And just a quick reminder that this is the first part of a 3-part series. We have another one in July, so in about a month's time, that will be talking about how we attract green talent, and then another one after the summer in September, which is about how we retain and build green talent in organisations, with people from a number of organisations such as Energise Black, National Gas, Energy UK. So please do sign up to those, and we look forward to seeing you there as well. Thank you.
So perfect. So that's it for today's session. Thank you all. Thank you to our host, Katie, and to our speaker, Steve and David, for your insight and expertise. Please stay tuned to hear more about CMI membership, and thank you once again for joining us.
Thanks all.
Don't forget, as a CMI member, you can find the latest management and leadership insights at managers.org.uk. If you're not yet a member, join our community to discover CMI Confidence with on-demand resources, our network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations.